a little flatter than normal, but you look good too. Lovely to see familiar faces. Steve read from Psalm 8, and actually I want to gear my reflections with that psalm. It actually asks one of the great questions of our time. I think it's one of the big current questions that many different disciplines are asking, which is, what is a human? As the psalm puts it, what is mankind? This is an issue today which is getting a lot of attention. And I've been doing a lot of research and reading around what others are saying, how they're addressing the question, what is mankind? And I don't know if you've ever considered this, but it's rather remarkable that we can even ask that question. Those of you who have pets, a guinea pig or a cat or a dog, I don't think your pets have the kind of awareness that allow them to ask questions about their own existence. I don't know if you've ever seen your cat scratching its neck with that look in their eye. Who am I? How do I explain myself? Animals don't do that, but we as humans can. Now, one thing I note as I read around this subject is that currently there are some rather negative, downbeat perspectives on our species. It's possible to detect what I call a growing disillusionment with our race. And actually, I'm calling this the disenchantment narrative, which I think is growing. You see this reflected in lots of TV drama series today. Westworld would be an example of that. Penny Dreadful, I could mention many others. But in some of these, humans who have been constructed through artificial intelligence, as in they don't really exist, they're actually better than the real thing. I don't know if you've noticed that. I think you see this growing downbeat perspective in the Extinction Rebellion movement. There's a German philosopher, Richard Precht, he puts it like this: Homo sapiens, which in the past millennia have taken possession of the entire planet and multiplied into billions, is one natural catastrophe among many others. Our growth, our expansion is a catastrophe. And there's a growing number of people who argue that planet Earth would be much better off without humans. I read and hear some who actively wish for the extinction of the human race. So today we've moved a long way from a guy called Swinburne. He was a famous 19th century English poet, playwright, cultural critic, and he wrote a poem called Hymn of Man, where he says, "Glory to man in the highest, for man is the master of things." And then you listen to the contrast today with the late Stephen Hawking, the great physicist. Hawking says, the human race is just a chemical scum on a moderate-sized planet. Quite a contrast there, isn't there? Thomas Ligotti is someone I'm reading at the moment. He's actually a writer of horror fiction. He has a background in philosophy. He's known for his famous quote, "Nature coughed you up like a little phlegm from its great lungs." Now, it's Valentine's Day today. I don't suggest you men whisper that into the ear of your beloved. Hello, my lovely chemical scum. I'm a newly made grandfather, just got a little grandson, and I'm not sure my daughter would appreciate if I called him nature's little phlegm. These are pretty downbeat ways of reflecting on the human race. Now, when you listen to current discussions about who or what a human is, you can pick up accounts that are rather contradictory in terms of wrestling with this big question, what is a human? And we're going to look at a few of those in a moment. Now, these questions, or this big question we're considering, has a follow-up question to the one that's set out in Psalm 8. Psalm 8 asks, what is mankind? There's another question we need to raise, and it's this. It was actually posed by King Lear in a Shakespeare play entitled King Lear. And King Lear asks, who is it who can tell me who I am? Who is it who can tell me who I am? What sources can I go to that gives an adequate account of our race, of who we are? Now, today there are two main secular sources who have taken it on themselves to tell us who we are. First of all, we have the life sciences, biology, neurology would fit into those. That's one account, secular account. And the other is the social sciences, in terms of looking at how we humans relate together and what that means for us. Now, both of these, giving accounts of who we are, what I call zoom in accounts. They focus quite narrowly to one aspect of what constitutes us. So let's take the first. Let's talk about the life sciences and what I call the hardware account for what a human is. So this hardware account zooms into our genes, the genetic side of us, each of us having a unique genetic structure. It would then focus in perhaps to the neural structures of our brain. And it would say, this hardware account, that's what we are and nothing more. That explains us. So humans in the hardware account are just one species among many. Our species called Homo sapiens. We are a higher form of ape. We're what many have called just naked apes. Now, this account, the hardware account, roots everything about us in the natural world. And that includes our consciousness, our very sense of self, which makes us ask, who am I? Includes all of our behaviors, all of our choices. It includes the capacity to create and compose Bach's B minor mass. It includes all of the religious inclinations. All of this is reducible to the material side. So it's a materialist viewpoint, what Thomas Carlyle last century called the gospel of dirt. And Darwin, of course, well known for his work in the explanatory theory that we arise from the material world, he also saw that this gives us a lowly origin. He said, man bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. Have you found that quote, Steve? Man bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. Now, this account, this hardware account, is significant for me because it leaves humans without a soul. We're merely hardware. We're merely material entities. And that's why I call it a de-souling account. It de-souls us. It takes away that side of our humanity. Now, much more could be said about that side, but that's one current account, which is very, very strong and very dominant. But then we need to move over to the second secular account, which is the one that really comes from the social sciences. And I call this the software account for what a human person is. So we've got the life sciences, now we move to the social sciences for its software account. So this zooms in to our social relationships. What we are, they say, is stamped out in the world of relations. So we're programmed by social dynamics and forces. And it's very fashionable today to assert that humans, you might have heard this, are socially constructed. We're made up, we're built by our social interactions. So the focus here is on how humans are nurtured. And how we're nurtured makes us what we are. So our software, our programming is being worked through our home life, our education, what we're bombarded by the media, our religious backgrounds would fit into this. All these social factors are shaping and determining what we are. Now, up until quite recently, nurture was seen in a positive light. That's what parents should do. They should nurture their children for good. And a good nurturing environment is good for us. And of course, most would still agree with that. But today, nurture is seen with increasing negativity and pessimism. The argument goes like this. There are social constructs out there that can be critiqued. That means we can look at them, these structures, and see the negative impact on individuals, how it determines our perception and outlook, our morality, our behavior, and even more, how it's conditioned our identities. And this is where something known as critical theory, this is where this comes in. Critical theory says the world is divided between those who have power and those who don't have it. And the goal of critical theory is to destabilize the power structures by shaking up the narrative that justifies them. And this is very negative. It says that Almost all of us, or many of us, the majority of us, have been conditioned badly by the power structures. And this new account, this software account, reduces all that a human is to race, to gender, and to sexual preference. And I believe this too is a highly disenchanted account. We're simply victims of those who are in power. And of course, there's truth to what's behind some of this, but it makes the whole of us the victims of power abuse. And what we have to do then is reprogram our own software so we can be at peace with how we perceive ourselves. So, hardware account, the life sciences, software account, the socialist sciences, and especially today, critical theory. Now, we as Christians should say this: there is a half-truth in both of these accounts. Of course, we are material beings. There's lots we can discover about ourselves through our genetic structure, through our neural pathways. But if we make that the complete picture, this has entered a terrible reduction of who we are. Because we're not just our genetic structure. We're not just social constructs. We're that, but so much more. What's also interesting between these two accounts, the hardware and the software, is that they can't really be reconciled. And in the domain of thinkers today, they're really in conflict with each other. There was a popular book, not that easy to read, written by a scientist called Steven Pinker, called The Blank Slate. And you can see the struggle between these two accounts as he works out his argument, which is basically we are nature. We are what nature conditions us to be. Nurture plays very little role. That's what he's arguing for. So those are the two current accounts, and I could say much more about them, but it's worth understanding and appreciating that these are in the air today in terms of the big question: what is a human person? And who is it who can tell us who I am? Well, life sciences and social sciences. Well, now we come to the third and the Christian account, which of course is the one that has shaped the anthropology of the West for centuries. Anthropology is just a fancy word for a viewpoint on humans, a word of wisdom about what it means to be human. And the Christian account really has shaped the anthropology of the West. And this, of course, is God's anthropology. Who is it who can tell me who I am? The answer is God can. In fact, we'd say only God can, in a comprehensive manner. And the Bible is very much God's anthropology, God telling us who we are. And this is important to grasp because who we are cannot be fully rendered by the life sciences or the social sciences. We need this broader, richer conception from the God who made us, the one who really can tell us who we are. Now, what I find interesting is that by way of contrast to the secular zoom in methodology, Psalm 8 reflects a zoom out perspective. Did you hear it when Steve read the passage? When I consider your heavens, that's the cosmos, the work of your fingers, the moon that we can see, the stars, which you have set in place. In the light of that, what is mankind? That you are mindful of them, human beings, that you care for them. Now, I find it quite instructive how the flow of this zoom out anthropology works in Psalm 8. So you get a really profound anthropology in the psalm. Firstly, we're called to zoom out with a consideration of the immensity of the universe. Now, this immensity is something we can't really get our heads around. You start thinking about the size of the universe we live in, and well, in my brain, my little brain, fuses start popping, pop, pop, pop. It's just too big to conceive of. We're told that the distance between planet Earth and the outer edge of the observable universe is 46 billion light years away. The speed of light is very fast. We'd have to go for 46 billion years to get to the outer edge of what we can observe. And the diameter of the observable universe is said to be 93 billion light years between the 2 points. Now, that just means nothing to me. Too big to even reckon with. And actually, as one tries to grapple with the size of the universe, human existence just shrinks to the vanishing point. We become so trivial as to be non-entities. And you could say, talk about disenchantment, look at us, little us in the size of the big universe. And yet, I'd say consider this. Here we are in this vast universe, and we as humans have an awareness of this vast universe like nothing else does. There's no other entity in nature that stands in wonder about the immensity of the universe. Only humans do that. The Jewish Hasidic philosopher Abraham Heschel, one of my favorites, he wrote this. He said, "An ant is never stricken with amazement, nor does a star consider itself a non-entity. Immense is the scope of astronomy, yet what is astronomy without the astronomer? Without us, nature wouldn't stand in wonder between the immensity. So the very fact that we can consider the immensity of the universe, where Psalm 8 takes us, makes us rather special." So that's where it begins. Then secondly, we're encouraged to consider the majesty and glory of God who made this immense universe. Start with considering the heavens, and then go on to consider the majesty and glory of the Creator who made it. Verse 1, we're told, there's argument from scholars what the correct rendering should be, but I like the one, "You have set your glory above the heavens." This immense universe, God's glory, is greater than this. And then in verse 3, the psalmist says, "This immense universe is the work of your fingers." Like God sat down after supper and did a bit of cross-stitching, the work of your fingers, to make the immense universe. And of course, the inference here is that the God who made the immense universe must have a greater majesty and wonder than what we can see through the telescope. So you start with the immense universe and you say, who made this? Well, the Bible says God made it. He's the creator of all things. So that's meant to inspire awe and wonder at who this God must be. In fact, we lack the appropriate categories to even comprehend of a God who's greater than this immense universe. So there's a flow. Consider the immensity of the universe. Consider the God greater than the immense universe. And then, in the light of that, ask the big question. So who are we? Verse 3. "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind?" Now, the point the Bible's anthropology makes is that we require this huge, awesome view of God in his transcendent glory to get hold of the wonder of what a human is. Once you grasp the awesomeness of God, the Creator, his true majestic glory, then you begin to understand something about the wonder of who we are. So you see, you zoom out in order to get the right perspective, rather than just always zooming in. That's the Bible's anthropology. Now, there are three crucial details that flow from the account. Majesty of the heavens, the greater majesties of God. Who are we in the light of that? Well, three things the psalm says. First of all, humans are created. As the psalmist succinctly states it, you made them. You made the humans. You made them. So humans, therefore, are not accidental, and no evolutionary viewpoint ever gets beyond that fact. If evolution is true, we humans are just accidentally on this planet. For good, for bad, well, who knows? But if we are created, then we have an existence that is purposeful. We're here by design, and that gives us high-level meaning. So if we're created, it's pretty hard to call us chemical scum. If we're created, it's pretty hard to call us nature's phlegm. No. To be made and created confers dignity on us. This great, majestic God who made the universe, the heavens, also made us. And I'd say also, because we're made and created by God, it's not ultimately corrupt power structures that define who we are. that is, being victims of those who abuse their power, those at the top. No, the core of us goes well beyond our social relations. That's where our dignity flows from. So Psalm 8 reflects that because of our origins, we can trace them back to a remarkable person. Because of that, the psalmist says, we are before one who is mindful of us. It's a question. Who is mindful of them? Who is human beings that you care for them? You think about us, you care for us. Now that's remarkable. Nature doesn't do that. Nature has no capacity to feel for human pain and suffering. When a nature tsunami wipes out 500,000 people, it just happens. There's no grief. And actually, if the human race went extinct, nature wouldn't weep our passing because it's not aware of us being here. But God, our creator, he is. He's mindful of us and he cares for us. And the evidence for that is everywhere. So humans are created. The second thing that comes from the flow is that humans are ensouled. Psalm 8 verse 5 says that this creator crowned us with glory and honor. And I think this is a nod to the fact that our creator has ensouled us. He's given us souls. And we read about this in the Genesis account, Genesis 2 verse 7. Then the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground. There's the gospel of dirt. And then he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. This breath is the ensouling of human persons. Psalm 139, verse 13, the psalmist says, you created my inmost being. Now, I believe there is plenty of evidence for soulishness. We have all kinds of human capacities that science, actually, the hard sciences, the hardware account, struggles to find an explanation for. Huge research in the nature of human consciousness, debates about language, and science begins to probe these things, but more questions than answers. But actually, we have the answer for all these capacities in our being ensouled, and we have answers without explicating us completely. To be ensouled means it always retains the mystery of what it means to be a human, no matter how hard you try, because humans are ensouled, you can never fully uncover what we are. I love Fyodor Dostoevsky, the great Russian novelist, and I love this quote. He said, man is a mystery. It needs to be unraveled. And if you spend your whole life unraveling it, don't say you wasted your time. I'm studying that mystery because I want to be a human being. The acknowledgement of the mystery of who we are because we're ensouled creatures. The hardware account, the software account doesn't account for this mystery. So created, we're ensouled, and then the psalm says we're appointed, we have a special appointment as rulers of creation. Verse 6, you made them, those humans, rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet. So by a divine appointment, the appointment of our creator, we have a fit for purpose design to be monarchs of this world, to steward it, to take care of it. That's a high calling. That's an enchantment of who we are. So those three things are key to understanding the Bible's anthropology, God telling us who we are, created, ensouled, and appointed as the rulers of creation. Now, God's anthropology, which most today reject, is such a contrast to the disenchanted modern accounts. And they really are disenchanted. They reduce us to less than what we are. Now, it's important for us as Christians to be clear that any disillusionment we have about humans is not related to the creation side of what it means to be human. Occasionally, I hear Christians talk about humans as if we're just all bad, but actually, on our creational side, we are enchanted. We're as high as you can go. As C.S. Lewis says, we are the holiest things within creation. Any disillusionment we have comes after creation. It comes with the fall, which will be the subject of our next talk. What's wrong with us? But the point is, we have the real reason, the true reason for a high view of what it means to be human. for what in the past has been called the sacredness of human life. Now, I think in view of these modern viewpoints that are getting stronger and stronger, and I believe which degrade us, the Christian account has to be retrieved today. This is the only account that truly re-enchants Homo sapiens. And actually, it was Christianity that gave to Western civilization its high view of humans. I have a friend who's an Indian and a Christian, and he says the greatest gift of the West was the gift of biblical Christianity, of this high, dignified view of humans. As someone who's not from the West, this just blows him away. Now, as this viewpoint is eroding today, I believe we're creating conditions that threaten what C.S. Lewis called the abolition of man. Now, we don't have time to explore this evening, but the transhumanism movement is an example of this. Elon Musk, much in the news these days, he's one of the biggest advocates on the planet for transhumanism, which is basically merging our biology with high tech so we can transcend ourselves and make an upgrade of who we are. It's a massive movement, which I think has the potential, as Lewis said, to abolish us. Now, it's a whole other subject, but I'm just saying on the foundations of these poor, degraded views, some great damage can be done. So, as I finish, what's our Christian response for those of us who are believers? And I just put these briefly and really in bullet form. But our Christian response to God's anthropology is that we have to live in gratitude and wonder because we have been told who we are. Such a wonderful thing. We don't have to be subject to the disenchanting accounts that we hear all around us today. There's a charming story about an English Puritan, I believe it was a Cambridge Puritan, who was on a walk with a friend and they came across a toad on a path, and this Puritan just fell to his knees and thanked God for not making him a frog. Not because he hated frogs, but he recognized in himself this higher life form and dignity that he possessed. We should live in gratitude and wonder that because of the Bible, because God has described who we are, we know it. Not because we're clever, but we have found. We've answered. The answer to Shakespeare's question is clear for us. Who is it who can tell us who we are? God can. Secondly, in an age of disenchantment, we must treat all other humans on the basis of this anthropology, this enchanted narrative account. As you guys know, there's so much noise and grievance and anger in the public square today. And all around us, we see the demonization of other humans. He's a bigot, he's woke. And much of this flows from a deficient anthropology. We don't see other humans as the holiest aspects of God's creation. We categorize them, we reduce them. And actually, as believers, part of our witness is making sure that we treat others on the basis of this remarkable anthropology. And then my third one, this could have plenty of discussion around it. In your gospel engagement with skeptics, use the Christian anthropology as your entry point. I believe many today feel this undermining of what it means to be human in the current accounts. They feel that. And we have to be sensitive to that and work with that. I believe there's a massive credibility to the viewpoint we espouse on the basis of the Bible. And I'd say with a skeptic today, it's much easier to begin with the Bible's view of a human than it is to begin with God. They just write off God immediately. But here's a place where we can begin, which is why I call it the entry point. And we have lots of immediate evidence to back up the Bible's anthropology. It's one of the book writing projects that is presently occupying my time. That's a little product placement moment. But the title is Humanity Matters, Re-Enchanting Homo Sapiens, for skeptics, to help them see that this anthropology has so much to offer and it's credible. So that's why I think it's an entry point. Good. That's it from me, Steve. Over to you.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed. You've given us lots there to think about. Thank you so much for that. All tucked into half an hour, perfect on timing as well. Thank you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pop into groups now and give you sort of 7 or 8 minutes, I think, to chat about things that struck you from that. See if you can generate some questions for Andrew. Keep him on his toes this evening. Make him think hard. So I'm going to put. Yeah, you may well find yourself in a group with people that you don't know. So do just take some time to introduce one another. Now that you've learned that you are mixing with people that have great dignity, it would be nice to treat them with abundant respect and find out who they are before you jump into conversation together. I'm going to